afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Assessment Readiness. Hello, my name is Darren Butler, and we're going to be talking about assessment readiness, ensuring your students are ready for the test. I see we have some great people here joining us today. I see Bill and Claire, Susie, Mackenzie. So glad to have you, and a score of others. Let's pull a few out there. So my name is Darren Butler, and I've been an author and a writing specialist now for a little over 15 years. I began my career as an enrichment specialist in a K-12 magnet school. I was there for 4 years, and during that time I was developing kind of my process for teaching writing and teaching reading comprehension. From there, I became an author in residence, traveling around to schools in the South, Eastern United States. And from that point, we gave birth to a company, an educational company, all focused on literacy and hoping to change the face of literacy. I'm also an author. I write children's, young adult novels, juvenile books, biographies, and all different kinds of things. I'm a member of the Writers Guild of America, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and even the Authors Guild as well. So what's interesting about that is that I think that I bring a unique perspective. Okay, so I'm talking to teachers who teach the craft of writing. Okay, so I understand, I empathize with that job and that position in teaching writing to children, kindergarten through actually 12th grade. But I also understand that of the student. As a writer myself, I'm a professional writer. I do this every day, and writing, whether it's writing a book or writing a picture book or a play, a musical, a movie script, I'm explaining something, writing blog articles, opinion writing, whatever it may be. I'm involved in the writing process every day. So I empathize with the student who's going through that process. So today we're going to talk about things that should be concerning all of us right now. So teachers, as you're looking at using some of the methods and tools that I'm going to be handing out today, why should you even be concerned, right at this point in getting ready for assessment? Well, we know that more and more assessments that are out there, they require students to write. We see a huge difference, of course, in those open-ended questions that would yield a response of, possibly 1 or 2 sentences versus essay writing, citing evidence in responses. That those types of essays or short answers or 2 or 3 paragraph answers where we actually cite evidence. So we're seeing more and more of that happen in the things that we're having our students write. Now, of course, you're looking towards the end of the year assessments, but it also is concerning in assessments you're doing for units, things you're doing in language arts, but also in science and math and social studies. So I want you to think about who's in danger. Which students are truly in danger? Now, I could say all of them, but in a poll we conducted, 82% of teachers, just like yourself, they said they felt uncomfortable teaching writing. They didn't feel like they had enough PD to do that, or not enough ongoing PD. Believe it or not, elementary students have little to no foundation in writing entering the 3rd grade. It's not a fault of anybody. It's just that they don't have that solid process, but we want them to. We want to build that, and that's something that's really important as you vertically align your writing program. In most junior highs, we have a limited writing experience entering the 6th grade because those upper elementary, they're not writing consistently. They're working on things specifically for assessment, but as far as an ongoing process of writing and reading comprehension, to really let that be ingrained in what they do, they struggle. So where do we start? How in the world do we start this? Well, let's think about asking yourself a few questions, okay? So if I was a 4th or 5th grade teacher, let's say at an elementary school, I would be asking myself questions to try to determine what are the strengths and weaknesses in what I do as a teacher, and then what are my students doing? I would want to self-assess myself, but also I want to assess and interact with my students to try to figure out where their strengths and weaknesses are. And above all, I want to create an improvement plan for myself, because I think part of being a teacher and part of being an educator that I have learned in my own experience is that I'm always trying to better myself, better my craft. I don't want to get into that rut of doing the exact same thing over and over if I'm not yielding the results that I truly want. I know you feel the same way as well. Oh, thank you, Claire. It's a great response too. Totally agreeing with us. I agree, Claire, that the more that we get involved with assessing ourselves and doing that, the more we're going to be able to help our students. So here's some questions I like to throw out. And these are really important questions for us to assess ourselves. How often do your students write? Are they writing single sentence responses? Are they writing one or two paragraph responses? Are they writing essays? Which modes of writing would I find in your classroom? What do you feel like is your strongest mode of writing to teach? What is your weakest mode of writing to teach? Do your students apply their grammar and punctuation skills to their own writing, all on their own? What is your procedure for grading student writing? In which subjects would I find your students writing on a consistent basis? So this is a long list of questions, but I think when you pull the answers to these questions, what you're going to discover is kind of the tier of where you are as a writing teacher or teaching writing in your subject area. So what's really important is trying to get some really positive responses moving. And you can pull things you've done from other PD workshops, things that we're going to do today that are all quite useful. The biggest thing is getting on a consistent basis to make the continuity of writing from grade level to grade level as you are vertically aligning. Now, let's talk about self-assessment. As a teacher, if I was to go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't think I would have scored fives on all of this. I would have been somewhere around the 3 to 4 range. And it took me a little while to develop this process of writing and build my own strategies. And I continue to this day to do things that further my understanding of teaching writing. I'm definitely not stagnant, that's for sure. So let's look at the fives. So a teacher models the writing process step by step with students, providing a clear path for success. That is so incredibly important that we're modeling for our students and that we're utilizing a writing process. You need a process of writing. I'm going to share one with you today. I think it's great. It's been very successful for me and for the students I've worked with and teachers I've worked with. And I hope you'll find some use in it as well. I'm going to give you that today. Does the teacher use keywords and instructions and prompts to steer students to the correct mode of writing? For student revision and editing, does a teacher hold students accountable for a high level of content revision and editing for conventions in student writing? Because that's really important. We want to grab that red pen, don't we? We want to grab that red pen and move and say, hey, let's mark up this paper. But before you actually grab the commas and end punctuation and capitalization, you have to really focus on that content. And I always tell teachers, separate the grade. Grade that content separately than what you would grade the actual analytics, the grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Time conditions. Are you on a continuous basis dipping into time conditions and allowing your students to experience that? Because that's so incredibly important. And they understand not to stress them out, not to build anxiety or pressure, but to help them manage their time and to not get frustrated and not allow anxiety to take over. Let's think about how you now would interact with your students. So where would your students fall on this rubrics? Are your students able to judge the length and structure of their writing based on the space provided? Do students have a clear, precise understanding of the mode of writing and the task before them? Are your students brainstorming for logical and creative ideas? Do your students generate content in their writing filled with strong details and examples? Do your students display a strong sense of organization and writer control in their writing? Do your students utilize vocabulary equal to the grade level and spanning 1 or 2 grade levels above their own writing of their own? Do your students write with great fluency from one sentence to the next and utilize sentence variety? Do your students make a few or no errors in punctuation, grammar, and spelling? And do your students display a unique voice and style in their writing? So if you're hitting fives in all those, that's awesome. That's great. But I would say probably 80% or higher of classrooms would say, oh man, we're somewhere between 4 and 3 and 2 in there. And it's different with different ability levels. So how do you build this towards consistency? Now, if you've been trying to quickly jot down this rubric, don't worry. We've got this as a handout. We're going to send this to you today along with the webinar. So you want to create an improvement plan. And that's a valid and very important, vital thing of what you're doing. Develop an improvement plan based on vertical alignment, because that's where you're going to get the continuity and you're going to build skills. You need the process of writing and you need the process of close reading. And I'm going to give you both of those today. Now, how do you change the mindset? Because right now, You were to think about your students, I would guarantee that your students believe reading comprehension and writing are for language arts only. I'll bet your students believe the rules of grammar and punctuation do not apply in math, science, or social studies. And even though you've told them they do, they really don't believe it. I'll bet your students' responses in math, science, and social studies are all multiple choice or matching because they do not consistently write in those content areas. Not as a fault. We all know that grading writing is a chore, it's a task. And those content area teachers, they're going to gravitate naturally more towards multiple choice. And there's nothing wrong with that. Children need multiple choice tests. They need them to work on their reasoning skills because we're going to see so much of that on these college entrance tests. We're going to see it on end of the year assessment. They have to be good at multiple choice. But we need a balance. We also need them writing in those content areas. So let's talk about the process of close reading. I developed this process a number of years ago. It's called RIP. It doesn't stand for rest in peace. It stands for read, interpret, and predict. So let's talk about what read means. When you read a portion of the text in front of you. You read it fluently, one sentence at a time. You observe punctuation. You read with great expression, whether the student is reading aloud or in their own mind. That's important because the brain stays focused. If you're reading like a zombie robot, the brain's not going to pay attention. It's not going to absorb the information. It's going to kick it out, and you're going to get through reading, and the child has no clue where to find information. So in the research I did, 98% of children are more likely to look back at the text, whether it's one or more sources, to find specific information if they have read it as we're describing here. And including in that, interpreting. You've got to ask questions, and based on the reading relationships of text to text, text to self, and text to world. You've got to ask questions from the anchors of key ideas and details, craft and structure, and the integration of knowledge and ideas. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You've all heard this. You all know this. But here's where we have a little issue. So dating back to the 1970s, the research even says, and we're talking decades ago, that we have this natural assumption that if our children can read fluently and we're asking questions, that's it. We're good. That's reading comprehension. But only kind of. So we have to ask these questions, but you have to ask those deeper questions that we see in those anchor standards of integration of knowledge and ideas and those reading relationship questions. We've got to train our students to ask those questions on their own. And they have to do that and really absorb the text to truly read to comprehend. Otherwise, they end up skimming and scanning and faking it and making you think they've read it when they really haven't. And of course, the P stands for predict. Make logical predictions, make creative predictions. Then you continue reading the rest of the passage or the next portion using the RIP strategy. So let's take a look at this passage here for fourth graders called Predators and Prey. Notice in the red, we have this here where you're going to go through and you're going to read one sentence at a time. You're going to go through and watch the expression, the punctuation, and all of that great stuff there. Okay, have you ever heard of words predator or prey? Now, most kids read this like that. Have you ever heard of the words predator or prey? Just exactly what do they mean? When we discuss the words predator and prey, we are talking zombie robot. And they're shoving sentences together that don't even belong together. So the brain is like, what? It's like, stop, you're going too fast. We've got to read the expression. Have you ever heard of the words predator and prey? Just exactly what do they mean? When we discuss the words predator and prey, we are talking about two specific roles in the animal kingdom. A predator is the animal with a food chain in the food chain that hunts other animals for food. An animal that is considered prey is an animal that has the predator eats. Okay, so I might stop and ask questions there, but I can keep going. Okay, a predator is sometimes also called a consumer. A consumer is an organism that eats another organism to receive energy from it and sustain survival. An example of this type of relationship would be the lion, the gazelle, in the African Sahara. The lion is a carnivore that relies on other warm-blooded animals as food in order to maintain its energy and survive. The gazelle is an omnivore that relies on plants to sustain its survival. As a result of these roles with the food chain, the roles of predator and prey become evident. So now we ask these questions. Let's pause. This is not the entire passage. It's a portion of it. We interpret by asking these types of questions. What is the difference between predator and prey? What is the difference between predator and consumer? Why do animals eat another organism? What is the best summary of the selection? And if we can answer these out loud in discussion or even in the mind of the reader, then they're really absorbing information. The brain's continuing to map where information is. And make predictions. Well, what's a food chain? What other types of predators and prey will I learn about? So by making those predictions, the brain stays on heightened alert to see if it's right. Now, you can see in this particular example here, there's more to read, and then we interpret, and then there are prediction questions. So what I want you to do on your own, and you've got this webinar, so you can go back and watch it, and you can break this down, even do this with your students if you'd like. What would be your predictions? What kind of predictions would you make about what they're going to ask you? And that helps the student before they even get to those questions, whether they're multiple choice or if they're open-ended or essay, they're already thinking about what they're going to have to regurgitate onto paper or into answers and responses. So now the student leaves this text going forward. And this is a science text. It's not a piece of fiction. It's exciting. But it teaches children that regardless of the content area, whether it's modern or classical, science, math, social studies, whatever it may be, that you have to read with this type of process. And it works, tremendously works. So there's a 4th grade that's part of one of our data schools for our program that they started implementing the RIP process at the beginning of the school year last school year in 14-15. Now, at the beginning of the school year, they took the STAR reading assessment, and then they retook it in January. Just from August to January, by applying this strategy, they increased their grade equivalency by 2 years and 8 months and their instructional reading level by 2 years and 1 month. Now that's dramatic. I had a chance to visit that school. I tried my best to derail them in doing an exercise just like this, and I couldn't. They were all 100% committed to reading, interpreting, and predicting. There wasn't a child in that room that didn't understand what they read. And when you get to these types of questions, have you ever heard of the terms predator and prey? Explain when you have heard of them and what you thought they meant before reading this passage. And now that you have read this passage, explain how your opinion or knowledge base has changed. Okay? So that's a good question, because you got to think about independently what you thought. And then you learned this, and now what do you think? What examples of the predator and the prey relationship do you see around your home? So that involves the child or the student's environment. In your own words, explain what characteristics a predator might have the prey would not have. And if we're citing evidence, the great thing here is we can refer back and say, according to the passage, predators and prey. Wouldn't that be easy? So we're teaching them to cite that evidence, to use the open-ended question to flip it around and make it a statement, to answer the question and give great details. So incredibly important. Now, you can change the mindset of your students. This is your opportunity to model the process of close reading and process of writing. Now, what is this process of writing that I keep referring to? Well, this is something that, as you can see my service mark there, I started working in this years ago, and I kept 15 years of research going, and I still continue to this day, cataloging, observing data, refining it, going back and making sure this process is continuing to work for every level of student. So let's talk about the first one. The first thing you do in the process of writing is that you have to make sure the child, the student, understands the task of writing at hand. That all goes back to keywords. Are we explaining, telling a story, describing, giving an opinion, doing an argument? And they understand they have to cite evidence. They understand they have to have details. Can they understand the space? We talked about this earlier. Are they writing a single sentence response? Are they writing a short paragraph? Are they writing 2 or 3 paragraphs? Are they writing an essay? What type of writing is this? So a child has to look at that and clearly understand what's expected of them. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is they have to brainstorm for both logical in-the-box thought as well as out-of-the-box creative ideas. And you bring all this brainstorming together, and then you go through, of course, you use graphic organizers for that, webs, T-charts, Venn diagrams. I even have some graphic designers that I developed myself that go along with it, and you make a plan. Now, I'll tell you one of my secrets here. I exclusively use bullets. And I have my own research, but I am starting to read all kinds of research from psychologists saying that bullets are the thing to use with children of all ability levels. Why? Because it's easy and straightforward. They get it. They take their brainstorming, they pull their information out, they make sure that what they're going to write in that response matches the topic. It gives detail the answer. If it's fluff, they throw it out. If it doesn't belong, they throw it out. If it's not enough, they can add more. Then once they get their bullets, because bullets see aren't in sequential order yet, you get your ideas down. Then you can go back and look at the bullets and make the decision, make the choice of which bullet should come first. And you put those in sequential order by numbering next to the bullets. Very simple. Okay? And by doing so, you're building automatic organization and sentence fluency into the writing. When the students begin to write, they take that plan with those numbered bullets. They build that very simple, basic sentence in the air or in their mind, and they stretch it. They enhance it to make sure they're having good sentence variety of simple, compound, and complex sentences. They make sure they have good word choice, bringing in vocabulary that's comfortable to them, as well as vocabulary they bring in from books they've read, vocabulary lists, spelling tests, things to enrich their writing. And then they can transfer that sentence to paper. So students can do that without frustration if they've gone through this process. It only becomes frustrating when you start skipping steps. Then we go into revising content. First and foremost, you've got to put the red pen down and not focus so much on capitalization, subject-verb agreement, and punctuation yet. Make sure the content is good. Because if you have to erase part of a sentence or an entire sentence and put something new in, then all that work you did on editing of punctuation and grammar is not going to be useful at all. So you have to make sure that that is fixed first. Make sure the content is strong. Then you go back and you edit for punctuation, grammar, and spelling. And that takes frustration as well. I cannot tell you the number of kids that I've seen just almost lose it because a teacher, or even myself, back in the early days, would correct all the punctuation and grammar first, and then say, well, actually, this paragraph really is a little bit of fluff. I need you to give it a little strong. And they're like, I just spent time rewriting this. I just added things in it. And I just fixed those things, and now I have to rewrite it again. So that's important. Revise content, then edit for punctuation, grammar, and spelling. So from that point, you need a process of close reading. You need a process of writing. Now, we believe at my company that reading is only half the equation. Of course, this is not a sales pitch. I'm not a salesman. I'm a writer, and I'm a teacher. I'm a writing consultant. But I've spent the past 15 plus years of my life researching and building towards the day that I can share what I do with you, the classroom teacher. And I hope that you will find value in this enough that you'll maybe convince your administrator at your school system to join a webinar with Weekly Writer. Very simple, go to weeklywriter.com. And in fact, on this email, you can email us and you're going to have great contact information. We can get a product rep to take you on a tour of Weekly Writer. No obligation, just check it out. And what you're going to find is this amazing 36-week program as a writing resource, how it gives you the tools you need to be consistent, to provide continuity, to put me as a virtual author in residence into your classrooms every week, because I have videos in the program of me modeling the process. Now imagine that. I can come to your school and I can spend a day with you and your students. I can come to your school district and give a speech and talk about that and do PD training. But imagine if you had that ongoing PD using a video that you can rewind, replay, go over and over at your disposal and your convenience. It's your tool for your classroom. I want to put the power in your hands that you and I can collaborate together. And as we collaborate together, that's going to enrich what you're doing with your students, because the students watch me model, then they're going to watch you model based on what I've done and what we've done together, and then they're going to work on their own. So I'm a firm believer that the power behind Weekly Writer is you. It's this collaborative spirit that we're going to have together. It's why the company is called Virtual Village Classroom. We believe it's a village. It takes a village to educate a child. And by working together, we're going to enhance every classroom across the country and build literacy skills. Now, I want to stay connected. So on this next screen, you've got some ways to stay connected with us, okay? So on the web, our web address is weeklywriter.com. If you go to that web address, you can check out the product, you can check out the writing resource. There are ways you can push buttons there and get to a product rep to at least get a phone call or an email and get you on the schedule for that free webinar just to go check it out, okay? Follow me on Twitter at Darren J. Butler. My personal email is right here. If you want to email me questions about what you've heard today, what you've seen today, if I didn't get to you and answering questions here, I've been doing on the side here for our participants. You know, if you need me to answer a question for you or you've got a question for me, I'm good. Email me. And I have a great blog about the process of writing.com. Go check it out. Subscribe to that blog and stay in touch with me.